Hey, everybody. It's Evan Grant from the Dallas News. I am here. I'm trying to gather my thoughts. I've spent the morning working on a column on the Mariners series that's coming up with the Rangers starting Friday. That is a critical series, and that's what the column wrote. The column I wrote seems to say. Um, if we get it edited and live while we're in the chat, I'll post that. Or Joey, our producer, who is not seen but can now be heard, will post that, won't you, Joey? Tell the people what you'll do.
Whenever it gets the green light, I will get that going on the website.
Look at that. Now we're a whole staff over here doing stuff. All right, so I'm going to let hopefully some more questions populate in here. We've got a couple. Um, but I'd like to get a few more questions. So if you've got questions, send them. I do have a request if you're watching live. Um, do you, this is non baseball, do you have a place in town from where you like queso the most? It would be very helpful to know where your favorite queso is from, in all seriousness. So if you've got suggestions, send them to the chat, please. That's for a future project. A delicious but future project. I don't know if you caught Sarah Blaskovich and I doing our top 15 hamburgers in town in the Dallas city limits, which we did earlier this month. Joey will post a link to that if he can find it real quick. But if you want to eat your way through burgers, be a great list to start with. All right. Anyway, as we start today, the Rangers are off. They begin a critical 4-game series against Seattle. I spent the game last night really ramping that up in my head. I just feel like in so many ways the season comes down to this. I know there's still going to be a week left before the trade deadline, and a lot can happen in a week. The Rangers need to create some separation with the Mariners. They go into the series a half game up at 51 and 51. You just split this series, you've created no separation. The Astros, I believe, will be playing at the same White Sox to whom the Rangers just lost 2 out of 3. Um, they will be in Chicago. Houston's won 3 in a row. They're now 2 games back in the division. Rangers play Houston in the 3 days leading up to the trade deadline. I just feel like it's time now. My column that will go up in a moment again points to the fact that over the last 354 games, 354 games dating back to June of 2024, the Rangers are at exactly 500. They're 51 and 51 this year, 81 and 81 last year, and from June 9th of last year forward, they were, or June 9th of 2024 forward, they were a 500 club. That suggests this isn't just a phase they're going through, more of an identity. And that's why it's really important, if this club is going to make another run, that they do something in the next week, starting with this Seattle series, to convince Chris Young that the glass is half full and not half empty. Um, what we all know is that basically this is a 500 team. And there's probably going to have to be some changes made at some point in time. But there is an opportunity, and there's an opportunity there for the Rangers this year, and they've got an opportunity to seize upon it this week. And if they don't take the opportunity this week, I think you could see some. I think you could see some drastic changes here. I would not put anybody, anybody of value off the market um, come the end of next week if this Rangers club does not have a hot 10 days. And 6-4 is not hot. They need to play good baseball. They need to go 7-3, get themselves 5 games above 500, create a little bit of separation in the division, prove that they are not just in first place, but can be a first place team. So that's my thesis statement for today. I know you guys have questions on lots of stuff. Um, let's get to it. We'll stick around for as long as we possibly can to do this stuff. Um, I know that there are probably going to be some folks who offer some names for trades uh, up in here, and so I'm not going to throw any names out there right now, and we'll get into that with questions. So if you've got a question, just put it in the chat, and let's go, folks. RJ Trey is our leadoff man today, and RJ says, in case I missed the chat, if catcher is a need, would you agree that Jonah Heim is gettable? Low-level prospect is all it would take, I think. To your question that Jonah Heim is gettable, I would agree. To your question that the Rangers would want to get him, I would raise significant objections or disagreements. I don't think that the Rangers want any part of that body language. I think that as Chris Young continues to grow into this job, he wants guys who are a little bit fiery, a little bit edgy, and who can obviously play good baseball. Now, maybe you overlook a player here or there, but the Rangers had 4 years of experience with Jonah Heim, and I do not think that that is a direction they would go. If you want to make a big block, if you want to address catcher and you want to talk about Sacramento and you want to talk about making a big deal, a needle moving deal, I think maybe if there's anybody that this club would consider trading one of its top 2 prospects for, that it would consider, and I'm not sure that they would do it even under those circumstances, but maybe Shea Langoliers of Keller, who has crushed this team, who crushes the ball in this ballpark, who's under contract and under control for, I believe it's 3 more years. That might be at a position that is barren across the big leagues, that is not deep in the Ranger system. Malcolm Moore is having a nice year at Frisco as a hitter. I do not think he will be a catcher in the big leagues long term. I think he will be a hitter somewhere, more than behind the plate. So if you wanted to consider a needle moving trade, maybe Langoliers would be that guy. But I do not see this management group having any interest in Jonah Heim. I think the last 2 years, the way he carried himself, had real repercussions with how this organization viewed him. Simple as that. I'm not. Can I just go with your last name, Bottini? Is that all right, Bottini? Dear Evan, I'm just praying for CY that CY doesn't stand pat. We need to sell or buy without fear. I would sell Young, Jock, Jock, Junis, Evo, and DeGrom. I can't believe someone would take Nimmo or Seager's contract. Okay. So, look, I mean, you're making your argument here, right? You say you need to sell or buy without fear, but you're basically selling everybody that would constitute a drastic rebuild. And if you're going to move the guys that you just mentioned, you have to move Corey Seager, because maybe he'd have more value after the season if he comes back and plays, but he'll also have 5 and 10-year rights, 10 years in the big leagues, 5 years with the Rangers, which would give him a full no trade ability. Right now, he has limited no trade abilities. My understanding is he could not block a trade to the Yankees or the Red Sox, 2 teams who were in need of a shortstop, 2 teams who would potentially have the ability to take on some, probably not all of Corey's money, but at least some of that money. And I think that if you're going to move the other guys, if you're going to consider moving Young, and I'm not arguing with moving any of those guys if this team does not play well over the next 10 days, but if you're going to sell those guys, I think you have to consider that it's now or never on Seager. And so it's a complicated deal with as much money as he's owed. I believe he's owed $140 million after this year for the next what would be over the next 4 years, right? 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, over the next 5 years. He'd be owed $140 million over the next 5 years. So you'd have to make some of that money wash. Is there a deal? I haven't looked at the exact details of Trevor Story's contract, but is there a deal where you could get a prospect from Boston, take on Trevor Story's money, and then Boston takes on all of Seager's contract? Is there a deal like that out there? Maybe. I'm not really good on high finance. I'm just not. But all I can emphasize here is I think that if the Rangers are going to move pieces, they've got to consider moving Corey Seager. I think it's an imperative, quite frankly. And to your point, you would sell Young, and that's guy that you raised that there's some thoughts one way or another, right? Is Josh Young really blossoming this year, or is this the year he's healthy and then he's going to start suffering more injuries again or regress? And the mantra in baseball is sell high. And so if there are teams that could use a third baseman, and there are a couple out there, certainly that's something that you would have to consider. I think the most difficult decision the Rangers would have to consider, I think the most difficult decision the Rangers would have to consider would be this. Jacob Latz has a ton of value right now. He has been a unique weapon as a closer. He's cheap in terms of salary, still not yet arbitration eligible. He's also going to be 31 next year. Is that the guy that you're going to build around? Are you going to build around a closer, or are you going to consider moving him back to the rotation? But I do think that the Rangers would have to at least be open, as much as I hate to say it, because Jake's been the story of the year. He's an easy guy to root for. I've said that a million times. But I think if the Rangers are going to talk about rebuilding and trying to maximize value, that's something they'd have to consider. I mean, Jock and Junis and Evo and DeGrom, those are all no-brainers. You move all those guys. Even with Evo and DeGrom having a year left of service time, or left of contract time, if you can move them and you're going to start rebuilding, you move them. It would be a shame. It'd be a shame for this organization to have to bid fair, to finally get aces to take free agent money and come here and get results and have the kind of years that they've had. DeGrom obviously last year, Eovaldi last year, Eovaldi really for the length of his contract, and have to move them. I think that would deeply hurt Chris Young on an emotional level, because he knows the history of pitching here. He knows how hard it was to bring pitching into the old ballpark, and he knows what he had to do to sell this team to Eovaldi and DeGrom. And if you've got to trade those guys and start over, for a guy who came up as a pitcher and who really values and understands pitching, that's going to be tough. All right, I rambled on about that one a long time. Ethan Melton says Arias to Texas seems done. I think he means done. It says dine. Jeff Passan and John Morosi and Jim Bowden all saying Arias to Texas is likely. Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, look, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of elements that would suggest, yes, it makes sense. Arias and Skip Schumacher have a great relationship. Arias is having a great year at a position where the Rangers starter is now in the minor leagues. Arias also has about $4 million left. And unless this team goes out and really plays well, they're not going to add payroll. Certainly not $4 million in payroll. So I think all of those are huge obstacles to cross. Not to mention, the other thing that we just spent 10 minutes talking about, which was this team could end up selling if it doesn't play well. And then there is this. If you are looking at this Rangers team, Do you think second base right now is their biggest priority? I don't. I think the stream of rookies that are having to pitch innings in a bullpen is a bigger need. You need to get some guys in the middle and later innings in addition to Jacob Junis and Jake Latz. Bullpen is the number one need for me. The number two need for me is an outfielder, a right-handed hitting outfielder of some type. Now look, Cam Cauley, well, a right-handed hitting outfielder who has the ability to play second base. Cam Cauley has come up and has done a great job in the 3 weeks he's been up here um, as a utility player who has gotten a lot of experience in center field this year. He is, I think Skip Schumacher said last night, he's really getting comfortable in center field. Again, if you're in a pennant race, do you want to entrust things to rookies in as many places as the Rangers right now have rookies running around out there? I would think a veteran outfielder who can play some center field, who can hit right-handed, would also give you the ability to not have to play um, Alejandro Osuna against left-handers, which he's done well against the last couple of nights. But is that something you continually want to do to get him playing time, play him against left-handers? Uh, I don't think so. I don't think that's ideal. I think you'd like to have a right-handed hitting outfielder. And all of this goes with the idea that look, Evan Carter has done much better here over the last month. He's still not a really viable option as a starting outfielder against left-handed pitching. So you need some degree of a platoon out there. And I guess it comes down to what's your decision? Is your decision that you can go with Cam Cauley and Evan Carter and play Osuna in left field against lefties, or do you need to strengthen second base? And from my perspective, I think the feeling is more that that the center field and the outfield is a need. You go further down the list now. I mean, I think you look at how thin the rotation is, and you look at the fact that DeGrom has dealt with this glute issue and will probably have to manage it the rest of the year. Um, Kamar Rocker was great the other night, and his velocity was back, but he had 10 days off. And I think there's real concern in the organization, especially with Kamar now going past any level of innings pitched as a professional ever. He's at 96 innings already, which is 10 above his total last year, which was his high. So you're going into uncharted territory, and I think the Rangers are very cognizant of the fact that without on 4 days rest regularly, you're going to see some dip in that velocity. That makes the off speed stuff a little bit less effective, and it leaves the fastball a little bit further up, and so you end up with a less effective pitcher. Still not certain. They're still not sold on whether Jordan Montgomery is ready to help them in the big leagues or if he'll be ready. Cody Bradford is several starts away in the minor leagues from being an option. Jack Leiter is still rehabbing. I mean, we go through all of this, and look, Nathan Eovaldi's dealt with a bunch of stuff all year. I mean, the most recently this illness that really kind of wore him out. But he's 35, and DeGrom is 38. And when you've got those kinds of guys in your rotation, aging guys, Nathan Eovaldi's on pace for 190 innings. He hasn't pitched 190 innings in a regular season in over a decade. So there's some dark clouds on the horizon where the starting rotation is concerned. And look, I just did this, and I know the column's not up yet, but if you look at the starting rotation over the last month, the numbers have not been great. So I get through all of that, and it's still, to me, those are all bigger issues. Those are all bigger priorities for me than Luis Arias at this point. And that doesn't even factor in the idea of what do they do at catcher. Elias Diaz has done a great job at catcher. It was a great find on the free agent market. Are you comfortable with Elias Diaz and Austin Wynns as your catching duo potentially for the rest of the year in a playoff race? because it's very possible that Kyle Higashioka and Danny Jansen, both of whom were trying to deal with elbow issues, um, both of those guys might be lost for the year. So, you know, if you've got another priority, would catcher be it or would second base be it? For me, second base, I don't know if Nicky Lopez gets overexposed at some point in time. Um, I don't know if, look, you get Lopez, if you get Corey Seager back and you go Lopez and Duran as a platoon at second base, maybe that gets strong. I just think the Rangers have more viable options at second base than they do at a number of other areas on the field. So that's my take. My buddy Gallagher Champ says he's not picky about queso, but he also lives outside DFW, so he's useless. Nobody is useless. Nobody is useless. I need your queso opinions. If you've been to Dallas, you had queso here. If you know of a great queso here, it's important to me. Okay? So you're not useless. Steven Solomon, hi Evan. Do you think the Rangers will give Walcott a late call up? My thinking is give him a taste as a DH bench power bat in August or September to prime him to compete for a position next spring. He's not, I mean, he'd be, look, I think September's certainly a viable option when the Rangers expand their roster to 28. But Sebastian's only going to be hitting. He's not going to be fielding or throwing this year. So he'd be strictly a bat off the bench or a DH. But I do think that the Rangers have interest in the whole concept of exposing guys to the big leagues that that there's benefit in that. And so I wouldn't rule that out. I've tried to probe them a little bit on it, and look, the main focus was just getting him back on the field. So he's back on the field. He's already back at Frisco. I haven't looked at his numbers since he started playing at Frisco, but he's back DHing at Double A, and so I would not rule out the possibility that the Rangers give him a call up in September. I think the only way they'd call him up at some point in time before September 1 would be if they are in full scale rebuild mode. And if they've traded Jock Peterson, if they've traded a number of these bats, you got to fill those roster spots somehow. Walcott would be as close as anybody to being big league ready, so I could see him being your DH for the last month or 6 weeks of the year, maybe that all depends on, getting him up to speed. Wait, let me just while we're here. So Sebastian Walcott at this point, right, has um he's got 23 plate appearances, 30 plate appearances if you count the rookie league games. And look, he is crushing it, right? He's hitting 300 with a 391 OPS, 391 on base percentage, and 3 extra base hits in 20 at bats at Frisco. So he's off to a great start there. He's bigger, he's stronger, but I do think that some of it is just getting him at bats too. I do think in some regards the Rangers have on a number of prospects they've pushed them early, and I think that there's something to be said for letting these guys finish out a little bit. Walcott has had a total of 134 games above Double A, has no games at Triple A. It's kind of like the Evan Carter situation, right? He came up and look, Evan Carter's September and October in 23 was outstanding. But I do think the fact that he only had 37 games at Triple A has impeded his long-term development a little bit. That's my thought. Am I right or am I wrong? If I'm arguing with my wife, I'm wrong. If I'm arguing here, I got a 50-50 shot. So, um, Gallagher Champ continues to go on. Wyatt is the only current big leaguer that's untouchable to me. And he says they won't trade Langoliers, but that would be great. I'm not sure. I mean, I've seen reports that Langoliers would be on the market. And you never know with the A's. You never know what their continual rebuild mode. Their continual rebuild mode has them doing. Um, I would agree that Wyatt is probably the only current big leaguer that's untouchable. Um, I'd have to really be bowled over to move Evan Carter. Um, I know his numbers are not great. Again, he is 23, an elite defender, and he shows the ability to get on base. I'm not sure that I'm real interested in moving Jack Leiter, Kamar Rocker. I think that there are certainly segments of the organization who would be open to that, but I just think at some point in time you've got to have a if you if you're going to move players, right? You've still got to have a core to build around, and whether that's for better or worse, you can't just do what the Twins did last year and trade everybody unless you've got a minor league system that is ready to produce. The Rangers don't have that. So I think you have to get great a little bit on a relative scale. But certainly, if somebody was bowled over or if the Rangers were bowled over by a Rocker offer and somebody wanted to put him at the back of their rotation, which you're never going to offer somebody a ton of capital for a back of the rotation starter, or if somebody thought we're going to take him and move him to the bullpen, that might be a different story. I just think that, like, for me right now, if this Ranger team is starting over, probably my core of guys that I am leaning towards holding on to starts with Langford, includes Carter, includes Leiter, includes Rocker. Uh, you know, I don't I don't think that he's a core guy, but I think that the Rangers have identified a role for Justin Foscue that could be useful as a DH, particularly against left-handed pitching. And the fact that he can play, it's not great second base defense, but he can go out there and play some second base. He can play a little bit of first base. That gives more value to a guy as a DH. So, yeah, is he a core player? No, I'm not saying that. Um, and listen, there's part of me that thinks that Jacob Latz is part of the core too. I just don't know what somebody would offer the Rangers for Latz, and if they offer them something that's a real advantage for this club, it comes down to a business decision. So there you go. Seager for Devers, Ethan Milton says. Just a big shakeup for both teams. Giants want Devers gone. Devers, it's Devers. I call him Devers. I don't see that happening either. If the Rangers are moving Seager, it's going to be, again, to try and save some money and get a little bit of prospect capital. And I don't see Chris Young taking on guys. I think there's a big difference between Chris Young and John Daniels in this regard. I think JD was willing to take on all kinds of players. And look, he brought in Josh Hamilton, he brought in Matt Bush, he brought in guys who had checkered histories in terms of personal issues or team reputation issues, and all he cared about was if they perform and they can find a way to keep their nose clean, we'll give them a second chance. I'm not so sure that Chris Young feels the same way about guys. I think he has a very and maybe this comes down to right that JD is more of a business guy and CY is more of a baseball player mindset. And so I think the player mindset has an idea in his head of what a good teammate looks like, what a winning teammate looks like in terms of characteristics beyond statistics. And so I don't think I think that would be more of a risk than CY would be willing to take. Would be my idea, just my thought. Um, oh no, Charles. What happened? Charles Tucker, my leadoff guy, my usual leadoff guy. Um, he's finally in here. Something happened to his question. Charles brings up this. He says, "Is Degrom or Evaldi marketable enough for the Rangers to deal and still make the postseason?" On that front, I say no. Um, I don't see that happening. I will bring up this intriguing idea, and it's something I'm planning to write about. Corey Seager would be the Rangers' best July 31st, August 3rd trade line acquisition, right? He'd be the best trade deadline acquisition. A productive Corey Seager would be a great trade deadline acquisition for the Rangers. The more I look at this team and the more I look at the future for Seager, I just am not sure if he fits here long term. And so I wonder if there is a scenario where the Rangers felt they could move Seager and some of his money, use the money that's saved there to add some payroll at the deadline, and get some prospect capital for Seager. Um, that's if we're talking in shipping terms, that's an incredibly narrow channel to try and navigate, because you are trading a guy who can make a difference for sure in a playoff race, absolutely in a playoff series. It would be a risk. But again, let me go back to the last 354 games. If the Rangers go 10-0 in this stretch, right? Great. If they go 7-3 in this stretch, how convinced are you of a playoff, of them being a playoff team? And so it may make you more willing to take on risky propositions. And I just wouldn't rule anything out at this point. That would be my thought is, save for a Red Sox type winning streak here, I would not rule anything out. I think the Rangers could go in a number of different ways, with the only certainty for me being if they tank these next 10 games. They tank the next 10 games, and I'm going to take a piece of queso as a dramatic pause. They trade everybody. How is that? Gabe. Gabe, I think this is a repeat of a question from earlier. If the Rangers lose these next 3 series, would they be guaranteed to sell? If so, who are the main pieces you see traded away? All right. I'll go through it again because I know this is going to be popular, but here's all the guys that I think the Rangers would look to unload realistically. And I'm taking Brandon Nimmo out of this just because I think his contract, his age and his contract would be difficult to move. And I think Nimmo has some value with a young team as a leader. But I think the Rangers would look to move Jake Berger, Josh Young, Jock Peterson, Corey Seager, Nathan Eovaldi, Jacob deGrom, potentially Mackenzie Gore, Tyler Alexander for sure, Jacob Junis for sure, maybe even, as I mentioned, Jacob Latz. I mean, it's a lot, man. They could look to move a lot if they have a bad stretch here. That's why, I mean, I know it's the overall 10 game stretch, but I just feel like you've got to get off to a good start against Seattle. I think it would be so deflating to simply split this series here, or to lose 3 out of 4. When Montgomery and Bradford get here, does Gore go to the bullpen? Larry. I think it's most likely that if the Rangers are contending, Cody Bradford goes to the bullpen. I don't see Mackenzie Gore going to the bullpen. I think in both those cases, one of those guys fills in for the spot that currently Cal Quantrill is holding until Jack Leiter gets back, providing there are no other injuries. Occasionally, then could give them a spot start in August and September, to get some of these older guys an extra day of rest here or there. But I think I think Cody Bradford, with his relief experience as a lefty, could be a great multi-inning option in the bullpen. And if you're going down the playoff stretch and you've got Bradford in the bullpen, Alexander, Junis, and Latz. Okay, those are 4 guys, and Colwyn. If you've got those 5 guys, and then a rotating cast of whoever as kind of a mop up or long guy. I do think it gives you the opportunity to keep keep somebody else, whether it's Montgomery, Rocker, um, as effectively a six starter or, bulk type guy. Um, the Rangers would love to have a six starter right now to give all their veterans rest, but they're so thin in the bullpen they can't afford to have a true six starter. So I think there's lots of different ways the Rangers could deploy Montgomery and Bradford, but I do not see Mackenzie Gore going to the bullpen. He's either in the rotation or he's traded. Charles is back. Love the Bobby V video. Why don't we hear about soft toss pitchers anymore? Moyer, Tanana, Huff, and Maddox had great careers. Um, Thanks for the note on Bobby Valentine's appearance on the Rangers podcast with John Blake. We love doing that podcast. We love bringing some degree of current players and some degree of history of the organization. I think so. We've had Bobby V on. We intend to get Ron Washington on, hopefully before the end of the year. Um, Unfortunately, Johnny Oates is no longer with us. We've had Jerry Naron on. Um, we've had Skip Schumacher on before the beginning of this year. We've had a number of Rangers managers. Is my point. Um, Hope you guys enjoyed the Benji Molina talk last week. We're with him talking about his cycle. Um, Next week, we're hoping to have Royce Clayton on to talk about him joining the organization at the trade deadline in 1998 in a flurry of moves that Doug Melvin made. But also, we've got to get the story behind the story on his clubhouse fight with Chad Curtis over Thong Song playing in the clubhouse. If you're not old enough to remember any of that, hopefully you'll tune in when Royce gets downloaded in a couple of weeks. So, just a heads up there. Listen, Charles, all I can tell you is velocity is the currency of the game now. You've got to, and it's in this regard, like those guys were 88, 85 mile an hour pitchers in some cases, with Moyer, and Huff was a gimmick pitcher. And look, I love knuckleballers, but, you know, you can name the all time great knuckleballers on one hand because it's a gimmick pitch. And I say that with all due respect for Phil Necro, my favorite player growing up. But the emphasis is just on velocity at every level, the age of from your preteens all the way up. So, you've got to be able to throw 90 miles an hour plus. 90 to 92 miles an hour is a below average fastball now. In the days that Jamie Moyer and Frank Tanana came up, if you threw 90, you threw hard. And so it's just that with advances on technology, both in the hitting science and in pitching science, you can get more out of arms than you previously had been able to get. And you're able, hitters are going to crush pitches, at batting practice speed. That's all I can tell you. Ethan, go 6-4 before the deadline. Okay, I mean that gets them to 2 games above 500. I don't know. I don't know what that does. I mean, how convinced are you at that point in time? Um, Lane Thomas is just a guy. Yeah, Lane Thomas is just a guy. I think there's some interest in Lane Thomas as an outfield addition. Um, if I'm my personal preference, and I don't know if let me see something real quick. I know my personal preference on all of this would be I really like Harrison Bader. He's been hurt. I think he's still on the IL. So I don't know if he's going to get back and be an option. But certainly Lane Thomas is a guy the Rangers have had some interest in. They had interest in him last off season. The Royals offered him more money, not by a significant amount. Um, and then you bring up you say they won't pay Arias $4 million, but we have Chris Martin at $4 million. Chris Martin is making $2 million this year. There's $3 million of his deal is deferred. Um, but you can't go back and there's no whatabouts in this case. That was $4 million they spent then, and it's $4 million that they don't have now, unless the Rangers make a convincing argument that allows Chris Young to go to Ray Davis and say this team has a real shot. To which I think Ray Davis's response is going to be, "What makes you believe that?" The last 10 days. So the last 10, these 10 days got to be impressive. They've got to help Chris Young make his case. Big Tex asks, any concern with the strength and conditioning program due to all the Rangers' injury issues? I do not have any issues with the Rangers' strength and conditioning program. I don't have any issues with the Rangers' trainers. I think reminder, give me your queso recommendations. Anyway, I don't know enough about health or conditioning to make a tie. These injuries are related to health and conditioning. First of all these players, they all have individual hitting coaches in so many regards. You think they don't seek their own conditioning people in the off season as well? And so I think the Rangers conditioning coaches, I think the training staff all do a great job. And I don't think they should be judged by the fact that in large cases the Rangers have an older team. They have drafted some players. Look, let's go back to this most recent draft, right? They took Brody Bumilla, who's going to have a second elbow surgery in a couple of weeks. The Rangers are willing to take guys who are injury risks. And so my point there is, a lot of times you're taking on guys who may have significant injury risk because they're value plays. And so I don't know if the Rangers knew what Evan Carter's back situation was when they drafted him, but he's got a condition. That's not something that that was trainer related. Wyatt Langford has a big muscular body, and does Mike Trout have a lot of injuries because the Angels don't have good trainers? I think it's more due to his body, and that's why, maybe it's lazy thinking on my part, but I've come to agree with the people in the Rangers front office, because there was a split decision at one point in time whether Wyatt Langford should play center or left, and he went out there, played played center field for a couple of days with Evan Carter on the IL, got hurt running the bases, or hurt his hamstring running the bases. But I don't know if that was impacted by the fact that he was playing center field and had so much more running to do out there, and if it fatigued him and that led to an injury. But it's certainly a viable thought. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, okay. So I guess I missed Walcott's games last night because baseball reference numbers weren't updated. But Walcott is 346, 433, 1125 in 26 AA at bats so far with a pair of homers. Ethan Melton says Josh Smith for Lane Thomas seems likely. I do think that the Rangers probably moved Josh Smith also at the deadline, one way or another. It's pretty clear that he has certainly worn out his welcome is not a good phrase here. But the Rangers are disappointed in Josh, in his performance. It's why he's in the minor leagues right now rather than in the big leagues. And yeah, this is a guy who is now into arbitration. And, I just don't know if the Royals are a team that would want to take on a guy who's going to be 29 next year and is already, making $3 million for Lane Thomas. I think they'd want a prospect of some type. But maybe Josh Smith goes over there, gets a chance to play second base every day. I think that's a valid thought. Um, KDM. KDM asks, how much do the Rangers have to spend if they add at the deadline? I don't know, man. I don't. I wish I could give you an answer. I mean, look, what has been the experience here with this club in 2024 at the deadline? To add, they had to subtract, right? They had to trade Michael Lorenzen in order to add Carson Kelly. Last year, they did add a little bit of payroll. Um, this year, I think it's going to be incumbent upon the team to play well. It's an incumbent upon Chris Young to go with Ray Davis and not take no for an answer when he asks for, hey, can I get 5, 6, 8 million to add to the payroll? Um, and listen, the other complication, and I'm honestly surprised that we haven't got any questions about Buzzer today. But the TV thing remains a mess, right? I mean, the Rangers. I don't know that the Rangers were getting paid by Victory Plus over the last couple months for the contract that they had for subscribers. I know subscribers who were on Victory Plus who wanted to cancel their subscriptions are having a hard time getting money back from Victory Plus. But the whole bet on Victory Plus and RSN was that this was going to be the best way to replace the revenue that was already going to be trimmed when all the regional sports networks went under. The Rangers didn't make back last year what they thought they would make. It was well under what they had made in 24. Clearly, with losing revenue along with this Victory Plus situation, they're not going to make what probably they projected for 26. So, how does that impact the bottom line? I don't know. Fans don't want to hear it, and I get it. I quite frankly, look, it's Ray Davis's team, and um, he's a billionaire, and he's the one who writes the checks. But from a business perspective, he's going to tell you that if the bottom line continues to shrink in terms of revenue, he can't justify adding more payroll. So that's the whole complicated case that the Rangers are going to have to go through. That's all I can tell you. Joey, what's the update on my column since you've put something in the chat?
Literally just put it in the chat. Chris has hit publish.
Oh, dang. So go to the end here and my column's up about this series. Hope you'll read that. Adley Rutschman for Scarborough package works. Ethan has a lot of trades. The great thing would be if Ethan was actually Chris Young, but Ethan, you are obviously a fan who likes to talk trades, and I'm not sure that the Rangers would do that. I'm not sure that Baltimore would do Rutschman for Scarborough straight up. So I don't know. And again, I'm not giving up the farm, or I'm not giving up the few pieces I have from the farm unless this team demonstrates over the next 10 days that they have some energy and execution. Otherwise, I'm not interested in those deals. I'm simply not. I am rebuilding. And so then I am not taking on, I'm either standing pat or I am rebuilding. And I am not taking on a guy in arbitration at that point who's making decent money, low rent money basically for a high dollar free agent, but he's making decent money. And I'm not willing to trade, one of my two best prospects if I'm not getting and for me, Langoliers is a more of a needle mover than Rutschman is at this point in time. And I'm only willing to consider a deal like that for a team that has shown the ability to say, we can get to the playoffs and we can compete in the playoffs. Larry Billingsley. I would not give up the farm like we did last year. Didn't work out that well. Our trade deadline pickup is a healthy Seager, Montgomery, and Bradford. Yes, Larry, you can make that case. You can. You know, and, potentially a healthy Jack Leiter sometime in August. I mean, all of that's valid. But I will say, for me, maybe it's just because all the time, the only times I watch Langoliers are when he plays the Rangers. Man, I'd love to have that bat in this lineup. And who doesn't love a local kid too? Sorry guys, I had to take a sip here. Um, Queso Rex, a thread. Shout out to Banditos, Tex-Mex Cantina by SMU. Oh, is that from you, Joey?
Yep, had to give one for the home base.
Um, you know, in all the years of going to Snyder Plaza, I've never eaten at Banditos, but I think that's a place that Clayton Kershaw always used to go with all his high school buddies from Highland Park, and I think that group is still very close, and I think they still occasionally show up at Banditos. But my go-to at Snyder Plaza for forever was Peggy Sue's Barbecue until that closed. I thought their ribs and their barbecue sauce was the best in town. Um, Shout out to Peggy Sue's. We miss you. Um, I did go to Bar Sardine for a hamburger recently for our hamburger list, and you'll know that it didn't make the top 15 burgers. I thought it was overpriced and just average. So I'll get over to Banditos and add that to the list. Also, love Ramble Room. Ramble Room did make our list for best burgers in Snyder Plaza. Um, Best use of shoestring potato slivers. So there you go. Lord Tubbington. Are you sure that's not is that my burner? I should go by Lord Tubbington. Hello, I am Lord Tubbington. Lord Tubbington has been impressed by Ben People so far. I gotta, can I tell you something? It's very, very juvenile, but all I can think of when I think of Ben Peoples is Mr. Peepers, the Saturday Night Live character. I think that Chris Kattan played. So I see him, and that what goes off in my head is Mr. Peepers. He's been pretty good. Um, Peepers, whatever you want to call him. He's been good, especially for a guy who looks 11 years old. He is the youngest looking player I've seen in a long time. Um, but really, in all honesty, you look at the waiver claims and the in season additions the Rangers have made, from Lopez to Diaz to Peoples. They got a solid outing out of Chris Paddock when they were in an absolute bind. The Rangers have done a good job on that front. They really have, and they've done a good job in that regard for several years. Um, and this year they've had to do it because they didn't add veteran free agents as role players or as guys on minor league contracts for the offseason. But Ben Peoples was a good waivers pickup, a little bit older. The Rangers like a little bit older than your typical rookie, right? Well, what is he, 25, 26? Ben Peoples is, oh, he just turned 25 in May. That's right. That's right. But he's been in the minor league system, or he'd been in the White Sox minor league system for forever, right? He had been, well, yeah, he started with the Rays, but he spent 7 years in the minor leagues before getting to the big leagues. Relievers take longer to develop. He's got a unique arm angle. Rangers like it, and so it was worthwhile. Um, Ethan, my goodness, Ethan. Oh, 48, Simple Man. Jacob, it's good to see you, Jacob. How can I be notified when you do your show? By the way, Eric Nadell and Matt Hicks is the best to listen to on the Rangers. It's hard to beat a Hall of Famer, but I got to tell you, Matt does a great job. doesn't get enough credit for he does more games I think than anybody on the TV, radio, regular broadcast. Jared Sandler might do more since he's on the pre-games most of the time. But Matt does a great job, and I think he gets overlooked behind a Hall of Famer sometimes. I can't argue with you. You know, but I also know that look, it's hard for some people to sync up their radio to their TV. I know if I'm trying to sync radio to TV, I get a delay, and it's really hard to listen to. Um, you know, and the TV, I don't mind Dave Raymond at all. The TV, um, if Dave is talking about something and there's cameras on that, or there's a graphic to put up, that obviously accentuates things. So, um, as far as our show, I don't know if you're talking about the YouTube channel. The YouTube channel, I'll always put up a notice about live streaming the day of, oftentimes before the day of. The Rangers podcast, the Sports Day Rangers podcast, can be accessed and subscribed to on any podcast platform, just about out there. If you've got Apple devices, go to the Apple, go to the podcast store, search Sports Day Rangers or Sports Day Insider. The great thing with this is you get two podcasts for the price of one, or none actually, because it's all free. But Kevin Sherrington and I do a regular Sports Day Insider podcast where we talk Rangers, but also Cowboys and other sports in town. And then John and I do the Rangers podcast. So each week you'd get two podcasts. And I'd appreciate if you would subscribe. And Joey, if you've got a way to put a link to subscribe to either of the podcasts in the chat, it'd be fantastic. Um, Charles, uh, why did Paddock only pitch once? Um, Chris had an opportunity to go to Korea or Japan, somewhere in Asia. Um, and so he had an opportunity to make a little bit more financial security. When you've been out of the big leagues or haven't had success in the big leagues, that becomes a big priority. So many guys have reinvented themselves after going to Japan. Nick Martinez, former Ranger draft pick, was an all-star this year, and obviously Colby Lewis reinvented himself in Japan. So that's why. I think he didn't want to try and ride this constant shuttle back and forth. Wanted to go to Japan, have an opportunity to pitch regularly, and maybe be able to experiment on some stuff and remake himself. So it appears, with the exception of another question from Ethan. Ethan, my man, anytime any team in the American League could make it to the World Series. I don't know about winning it. If I'm the Rangers, I go all in. DeGrom and Nathan are old. Rangers look like a future lottery team in 2 or 3 years. Again, yeah, possibly. But I have to say this again, Ethan. This is 354 games of exactly 500 baseball. At some point, it becomes your identity. It's not something you can shake off. Yes, the American League is bad. Do you like the Rangers' chances against the New York Yankees? Do you like the Rangers' chances against Tampa Bay in the playoffs? If there's a realistic chance to make the playoffs and compete, for sure, go as all in as you can. But the realities here are that there is not a minor league system to draw from. There are financial constraints, and this team has not demonstrated consistent good baseball. And so for me, that makes me think maybe it's time to stop banging my head against the wall, or at least the head that's visible here. Stop banging my head against the wall and start building towards the future. That's all I can tell you. Ethan, dude, I appreciate your eagerness today, but I think that was the last one. We can't go through any more trade possibilities today. Um, and we've been here an hour. Usually an hour is the time limit. You guys are great. I really, uh, I really appreciate all the input today. And I do it. I do every week that you do this with me. It's a great way to connect. I find it far more useful than Twitter these days. I look forward to doing these things. I look forward to your questions. I hope you guys are willing to put up with my stupid comments and all of that. I hope you'll give Joey a big round of applause. He's great at this executive producing gig. And subscribe to the newsletter at dallasnews.com to get our Rangers newsletter. Subscribe to the podcast if you can. Like this YouTube channel, please, or subscribe to it. And listen, there are some great subscription specials for dallasnews.com right now. 25 cents a piece. I think it's 25 cents for 3 months. Joey, if you've got a subscription link, maybe you could drop that in real quick. I know that there's people who really believe that news should be free. I can tell you it's expensive to do what we do, and the morning news invests real money into it. We try to bring you as much Ranger coverage across as many platforms as we possibly can. And the best way to say that you approve of that is to say, we'll give you a chance to earn future investment. So with that, I'm going to sign off, everybody. Thanks for listening. Probably going to wait. Next week's going to be really hard because we've got a travel day on Thursday from Tampa. We got a day game and then travel from Tampa to Houston. Next week's going to be really difficult. So let's plan on doing a post-trade deadline wrap-up. That should be a big episode, providing the Rangers make some significant moves. I want to shout out to Joey again today. I want to shout out to Ethan for his enthusiasm and for subscribing to whatever you just subscribed to, Ethan, whether it's the newsletter, podcast, or the actual DallasNews.com. Thanks, everybody. And I guess the subscription special, I'll just leave it at that, was 99 cents for 6 months. So you would certainly get the rest of this season and into the off season for 99 cents. Plus all of the Cowboys season, if you're a Cowboys fan. So, all right, everybody, thank you so much. Appreciate you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.